Here's your smart fact of the day. What is the difference between strategy and planning? Well, strategy is about understanding your environment and making choices about what you will do. Think maybe of like where and how to play and all of that. Planning, on the other hand, is about making choices about how to use the resources you have and the actions you will take in order to achieve the choices made inside your strategy. Welcome to Smarter With Sid. And in this episode, which is very much in our new year 2023, what we're going to try and figure out is there a difference between strategy and planning? How is the sequence played out? And I think it is extremely significant for all of us doing strategic planning for our new financial year. Let's go. So what's the context that I'm talking about over here? The context is essentially, I think, somewhere around March or somewhere around April, the new financial year starts. And in the new financial year, what we need is a plan, a budget, and all the stuff that we're going to do, whether, we are in the marketing department or in the CEO's, roll call or whatever it may be, we need to have a strategic plan for a year. I guess that's just how things have rolled out. And if you're in a startup, then, well, you probably need to have a strategic plan figured out for, when you start up, or maybe even if you've completed 1 year or the rest of it. And this is where a lot of discussion and debate has happened. In fact, some of us probably already have our strategic plans and budgets in place because we work from calendar year to calendar year. All said and done, it seems to be a necessary evil. And here are my thoughts on this particular aspect of strategic planning. I was going through some YouTube videos, how I get into one of those rabbit holes, and I got into one specific rabbit hole with an author who I must say was really interesting. Now, this was from the Harvard Business Review, and it was a specific chap who was Roger Martin, and he was talking about the difference between strategy and planning. Now, what does he mean by that? He says that strategy is all about understanding all the choices that are there on your table, as far as finding a segment of people that you're going to target and understanding, how you're going to pitch to them and understanding what you're not going to do and understanding what you are going to do and stuff like that, right? So that was strategy. And planning is all about utilizing your resources and making everything into an executionable thing, really. And then therefore budgeting for it. But what he said kind of made me think, and he said that we have now been combining the two terms strategy and planning to something called strategic planning, and it is being headed by a lot of people who understand the number crunching, who understand how to build an Excel sheet, who understand tasks and activities, and therefore are kind of missing the point between what a strategy is and what an execution oriented plan is. What he says is that the function strategic planning typically ends up done by number crunchers and bean counters and people who come into the game from a resource first perspective. Now, what do I mean by that? It means that, okay, so I have to start a new factory over here in XYZ place, or I have to hire a new team, or I have to look at launching something or whatever it is. And those become a set of activities that typically are laid out in a plan. And we tend to conflate it with, oh, this is my strategic plan for the year, because we've got a list of activities which are kind of logically linked to each other. But at the end of the year, what we tend to find out, according to him, that Roger Martin that is, according to him, what we find out is that even if you achieve all the stuff that is out there in your strategic plan, you are not particularly going to succeed in the marketplace. And therefore, he said, you got to cut the bullshit. Essentially, you got to develop your strategy first and then do your planning later. And essentially, he believes that creating a strategy is a creative act rather than a number crunching act, because it requires a deep insight into customers or into, how you're going to reach them, or into how you're going to create value for them and the rest of it. Now, this kind of is very close to any marketer's heart, but perhaps sometimes what does tend to happen is that the marketing person is waylaid by a lot of other functions in any organization. Or maybe the startup founder is a tech-driven bro who first says, okay, building a set of products is essentially part of strategic planning. No, it's not, according to Roger Collins. And I tend to agree with what he's saying. I do tend to agree with what he's saying because it is a very important thing for us to understand exactly what is our strategy, which means how are we planning to meet our objectives, the how part of it, right? And the planning is what to do. So why probably is the objective, the how is the strategy, and the what is the planning to my mind. Now, these are my words, not Roger Martin's words. But then I realized as I started thinking about it slightly deeper, that why do people punch together the term strategic planning? Maybe it's got something to do with the probably dated way in which we plan for things. Now, planning happens over a year, and a lot of times what we are ending up doing is creating a plan which actually loses sense with reality because things unfold. COVID happens, the recessions happen, the war between Russia and Ukraine happens, and so many things that we can't predict. Now, there are times that you can predict when it's a slightly stable year and the rest of it. But I really doubt that the year 2023 or the years 24 or 25 or even a lot of the years coming ahead are going to be relatively stable for us to literally plan out the way in which business as usual takes place. But this actually kind of made me think, because what I realized was that planning is done probably to do due diligence and to be thorough. Okay. And I'm going beyond maybe what Roger Martin is saying. And I think strategy also is kind of not done on its own, because I don't think people have enough vision in volatile years to create a strategy which is going to last for a year unless and until they try a lot of things, isn't it? So therefore, they kind of put together a bunch of activities that they can do, or all of us do that. So why we do this, and we kind of hope and pray for the best. Now, therefore, the core question is, how the hell do we develop a strategy that will actually stick? And this is where the concept of product market fit probably comes back into being. Now, here is what I feel we could do differently rather than just create a plan, a strategic plan for a year. Maybe what we can do is just leave the year concept aside, just leave the the calendar year or the financial year concept aside, and just identify and ask ourselves, do we have a strategy that we can use to create big difference for ourselves in the marketplace? And if we don't, if you're, getting overwhelmed by competition or overwhelmed by the lack of customers or whatever it may be, perhaps it's the time to figure out what can our strategic approach be. Now, you may not know unless and until you're Steve Jobs or somebody prescient like that. You may not know. So then what do? What you do is identify a few hypotheses for your strategic approaches and test these things out, and just make a plan for testing those things out till you figure out what is getting that traction. Now, this might take a month, a whole year, or maybe a time period in between, but perhaps that is what your plan should be. Because trust me, the moment you find the difference, the moment you find your strategic approach, then you can call in all your number crunchers again and make a complete new strategic plan out of it, or rather just a simple plan, because the strategy is thought through. You've identified something that is working and it is not working. I believe, therefore, that we are conflating the term strategy and planning because we don't know how and which strategy is going to work. The how to is confusing. And this is where I think perhaps splitting the terms strategy and planning and actually identifying the product market fit approach for strategy, doing first and then doing the plan, and maybe just making a plan for testing out the strategic approaches first. Yeah, if you get what I'm saying, is probably more par for the course. I hope you'll like this episode of Smarter with Sid. I think what I'm trying to achieve with an episode like this is to present a new novel way of thinking. Perhaps it may work for you and your organization. Even if it doesn't, have a thought about what you can pick from something like this and apply. So what I'm not giving you is advice. What I'm giving you is perhaps just some thoughts. Just pick up stuff that is going to work for you. And if you like this episode, do like and subscribe to this podcast, and make sure that you follow me on LinkedIn and on Instagram, where I'm the traveling professor. And hey, if you like stuff like this, just go to IVM, my friends. They've got a lot of wonderful stuff waiting for you. On that happy note then, on that happy note.